No, it's on now. So we go live in January. If we go through the top table, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Joanne Chase, Solicitor of the Planning Committee today.
Nicola Perry, Democratic Services.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager.
Amy Longford, Development Management Area Manager.
Adam Foot, Senior Development Management Officer.
Okay, thanks everybody. We go straight to the agenda now. And Nick, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Just apologies from County Councillor Jill Bond.
Okay, thanks very much. Has anybody got any interest that they need to declare at this stage? No? If anything crops up during the meeting, can you let us know then, please, and fill in the pro forma accordingly. So the next item is to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is anybody prepared to propose that we accept these, Sue? Thank you, John. Any matters arising? Okay, thanks very much. Right, so we'll go to the agenda now and look at the applications before us. I do propose to take the ones where there's public speaking first. And the first one we'll be looking at is DM 2022-00969, which is the erection of a steel frame portal building to be used for the production and canning of spring water at Temp Farmhouse Road, Llantrissant. Amy?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can everybody see the presentation? Good. So the application is before members today after being referred from delegated panel. The application was presented to delegated panel as unresolved objections have been received. So the application site is located to the east of the A449 and the hamlet of Llantrissant. The farm is set in open countryside, accessed off a minor road running south towards Wentwood. The slide shows the nearest property to the east of the aerial photograph here on the presentation. The application is for a steel portal frame building to house the canning operation of Temp Tonics, which involves flavouring and canning of spring water. The principle of the proposed use of the building is considered acceptable as a form of rural farm diversification. And here the operation is run in connection with the main sheep farming activities on the site. As members saw yesterday, the farming operations are still comprehensive and form the primary functions on the site. As all the existing buildings are utilised for farming, the policy does allow for new buildings to support diversification, as long as they assimilate appropriately into the landscape and do not cause other adverse harm. The application is also supported by a business plan outlining the operations and the growth of the business over the next 3 years. So if we just have the next slide, that'd be great, thank you. The proposed new building will be 12 metres by 18 metres, clad in green-coloured metal sheeting. The external appearance will be the same as a standard agricultural shed set adjacent to the existing farm buildings, which you can see here on the slide. It is considered that there is very limited landscape impact, given that the building is appropriate in this context and setting. It's also proposed to provide some additional fruit trees to the site to provide ecological enhancement, which is secured through a condition identified on the site plan. If we just move to the next slide. This shows us the access off the minor road, following the drive up to a plateau at the top of the ridge. And the next slide shows the position of the proposed building to the southeast of the complex in red. And the next slide shows the elevations and the floor plan. As discussed, the building is a simple agricultural shed, which will be the same as the existing adjacent agricultural shed to which it is proposed to sit. It is proposed to cut the building into the bank adjacent to the existing with an element of a retaining wall. Following the site visit, it's become clear that the application does not benefit from a section drawing showing levels, and it is considered to require a condition that provides section drawings to be dealt with. The application seeks approval for the building itself and for it to be used to can spring water. So the next slide shows the spring water, and the next one, which is currently extracted from the site. The dashed line shows the new route of pipework to redivert the spring water to the new building marked in red. The trench will also include other services such as power. There have been a number of objections to the application, mainly in relation to the water abstraction from the site and the effect that this will have on the neighbouring water supplies. However, the abstraction of water is not part of the planning application. This is a matter for NRW, as they are the governing body who regulate water abstraction and issue licences. NRW have been consulted as part of the application and do not raise any objections. The abstraction licence is required should the abstraction exceed 20 cubic metres a day. The applicant has confirmed that abstraction at the site is not anticipated to exceed this requirement. Should it be exceeded, this is a matter for NRW to manage and consent if appropriate. Despite this confirmation, the abstraction of water remains outside the application before you today, in that planning permission is not required for abstraction of water from the site. This is properly a matter for and regulated by NRW. In relation to surface water, this is outside a flood zone and surface water will be managed through a SUDS application. There are also concerns over the proposed development in terms of traffic and increased vehicular movements. In this instance, the new building would utilise the existing access. There are no proposed changes to the access or drive itself. The Highways Officer is satisfied that the local highway network is capable of accommodating the increased vehicle movements to and from the site. It is noticed that the development is low-key manufacturing and distribution, with an expected movement of 1 HGV and 3 small van movements per week. Given the farm can operate on large farming machinery, movements with no restrictions, this is considered safe and acceptable. Concerns were raised over the future expansion of the site and production. However, members are respectively reminded that we are not assessing the impact of future developments on site, only the proposals before you today, of which the Highway Officer is satisfied is considered acceptable and offers no adverse impact to safety or capacity of the road network. The proposed equipment for canning has capacity for 8,000 cans a day, which will require the 1 HGV and 3 small movements per week. This degree of traffic has been considered by the authority's highway officer, who raised no objection to the application as proposed. Concerns have also been raised in relation to noise. These relate to the impact of the canning process inside the building on any neighbouring properties. It is considered that the noise from the manufacturing will be an acceptable level, canning 1,000 cans per hour, and is not a scale that would involve unacceptable noise, levels of noise and intensification. The proposal is adding lids to preformed cans. The application has been considered by the Environmental Health Officer, who does not consider that the proposals substantiate an objection, as the nearest dwellings are approximately half a kilometre away, and there is residual background noise from the farming activities. However, as a precautionary approach, they do request that a condition is applied for noise management plan. This is to include operating hours of the buildings, which will ensure that the building is not operated in unsociable hours. If the activity were to cause a nuisance, Environmental Health have separate legislative powers to manage this eventuality. So the proposed condition is on the next slide, please. That prior to the initial production of canned spring water, a noise management plan should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. It shall detail measures to implement that noise management from the proposed development, including operating hours, and therefore the development will be carried out in accordance with any agreed noise management plan. Overall, the application is considered acceptable in that it proposes an acceptable level of farm diversification to support the wider workings of the farm, with no adverse impact on highways, landscape, ecology, or neighbour amenity. The building as proposed will be canning from this building alone and is secured through a condition which provides a natural limit to the scale of the operation before members today. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the officer's report and the additional condition in the slide before you now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Just before I bring in the local member, I just realised I didn't introduce myself or the Vice Chair, so I'm Councillor Phil Murphy. Dale?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Dale Rook and I'm the Vice Chair.
And one other bit of housekeeping, the people are doing it anyway, but can I remind everybody, particularly those online, to use the chat function for hands up rather than putting it on the screen, because it's much easier for us to control that way. So we'll go to the local member now, Councillor Bromfield. Faye?
Hi, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy, for your report. I welcome this application and I would urge the committee to support this. As we are all aware of the uncertainty and struggles businesses are facing, I find it very encouraging to see that a family farm that has been in business for 4 generations is taking the bold move to diversify. It's very positive to see that this application meets policy set out in the LDP and Planning Policy Wales 11. As a local authority, we really need to be encouraging businesses and local farms to diversify. I note from correspondence with officers and the applicant on the planning portal that spring water is already being extracted and stored from the site. I am satisfied that the applicant has explained this process. Natural Resource Wales have no concerns over this, just noting that the usage be increased and a licence will be required. However, the applicant has stated they are and will be using significantly less than that of the threshold for requiring a licence. As this is protected under law from NRW, I don't think this should be a factor when making our decision. I have noted the remarks from Highways. However, as a committee, we can only look at this application for what is before us today. Should the applicant seek to expand in the future, this would warrant an application in its own right to become before planning officers. The road to the farm is located. The road the farm is located on is frequently used by HGVs, logging companies and farm vehicles from this farm and the surrounding farms. Colleagues, I don't think one extra HGV per week is going to have a detrimental impact on the road. I welcome the applicant will be planting fruit trees, and that will further benefit the wildlife and biodiversity on the farm. And I note that the applicant is looking to make the process of canning sustainable and in a carbon neutral way. The applicant has been sympathetic to the design of the building and keeping it aligned with the buildings on the farm itself. In relation to concerns over noise pollution, I understand that very little noise will be generated from the canning process, and the daily workings of the farm itself generate much more noise. I note the proposed business hours are 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday, so obviously not within antisocial hours. So I don't feel that a noise pollution concern can hold any weight against this application. Given the challenges faced by farmers with more to come in the future, I feel strongly that we as a committee should support the diversification of a family-run farm. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bromfield. We've got no comment or anybody speaking from Llantriston Borough Community Council. So I'll now go to Jonathan Eady, who wants to speak on behalf of the objectors. You're welcome to do it from there, or you can come to the lectern. Don't forget to switch your mic off after you've finished, because the system will shut you down.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the discretionary opportunity to speak today. I speak on behalf of the owners of 3 residential properties impacted by the application. Together, we represent 50% of residents in the NP15 1LU postcode, excluding the applicant's properties. Skeeber Wen House, White Barn House and Derwin Mellin, supplied by borehole, are sited off the old road Llantriston, abutting the borders of Wentwood Forest. Skeeber Wen House is itself contiguous to the applicant's land. White Barn House is dependent on potable supply from Skeeber Wen House. Both properties have been omitted from any consideration within the planning officer's report. Specific concerns with the report relate to superficiality, balance and evidential weakness concerning water, scalability of operation, noise and biodiversity. We are grateful to Anthony Bruton, Environmental Officer of National Resources Wales, and also to Anthony Davis, Environmental Health Officer for the Council, for their late interventions and inquiries. NRW, as we've just heard, has visited the site to assess total water requirements concerning the specific concerns relating to the farm as it stands, the current and approved dwellings that are to be developed further, and 3, the separate new canning operation just mentioned. Environmental Health, as we've heard, wanted to assess likely decibel levels of operation in context of what to us is an inferior single-skin uninsulated metal shed proposed for the declared use. We think this needs to be explored further, but in any event, consider the application fails in context of Policy RE3 and related structure and local development plans. In the case of water, this application in context of purpose offends NRW's duty under the Future Wales National Plan to balance the water needs of the environment, society and the economy now and specifically for the future. Extraction and removal from site reduces water resilience. The farm is already understood to be utilising tankered supply. Reduced water levels and borehole pressures threaten viability of existing homes and businesses. Additional extraction places incremental strain on a single source in disregard of the current drought emergency. In the case of scalability, the canning factory also affords opportunity to receive tankered water from other off-site sources, increasing noise and traffic, and already a concern that has been flagged by the Highways Authority, although they consider the initial start-up to meet its requirements. Similar ventures in Pembrokeshire have resulted in international buyouts, scaling potentially up to a 24/7 operation, increased noise and traffic, and with adverse outcomes concerning meaningful employment, local economy and local amenity. In the case of noise, unsuppressed manufacturing noise, indicated here at 48 hours over a 6-day week, but itself scalable, does not bear any comparison to intermittent agricultural activity, which is current and quite acceptable at this time. Canning plant is understood to operate typically at 90 to 100 decibels. Environmental health assessment has not actually confirmed what this proposal suggests in terms of specifics.
Can you start winding up now, please?
Sorry?
I say, can you start winding up now, please? You're starting to run over your time. Carry on.
Okay. Topography dictates that noise emanating from the valley site is amplified upwards. Contrary to the suggestion in the report, this is not mitigated by vegetation in any material way, as this is recessed in the valley below. We endorse the need for a substantive noise management plan as suggested by Mr. Davis. In the case of biodiversity, no independent assessments have been provided concerning rare and protected species. Creation of an orchard does not materially offset the industrial impacts and attendant risks. The report as submitted does not allow the committee to discharge its obligations under Planning Policy Wales PPW11 in our view. In conclusion, the report is superficial, unbalanced and selective. A decision to approve would be perverse on the available facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Amy, is there any points that you want to pick up on before we go on?
I think, do you want to carry on with the public speaking and we can do questions then?
Okay, in that case, we've got Mark Williams. Mark, you wanted to come up to the lectern? Just to remind you, you've got 4 minutes to make your presentation. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I would like to take this opportunity to give you a little context and background into the application. We are a family farm. We farmed a Tump farm for 4 generations. But in the current climate, we cannot continue to sustain the farming business as it is. Our costs are too high, our revenue is too low. But we are doing all we can to ensure and maintain the farm within the family. At the same time, we want the farm to be sustainable, to support the climate agenda, and to do something for the future of our family to continue to enjoy. I want my young children to be able to stay in the county and be part of our community. We want our business to contribute to the community, to give something back and to support the council in meeting your own objectives. And that's why we're looking to diversify. We are lucky to have a county that has put the local enterprise and initiatives at your key objective. Your recent published corporate plan states you want to achieve sustainable local agriculture and farming practices with public services and residents consuming more local and seasonal produce. Provide more support for people who wish to start their own businesses in the county and have specific focus on innovation in sectors which include food and drink. So our plan application will hopefully be part of your success story in achieving some of these objectives. A little few details on the application. The plan application is for a shed, a farm building in keeping in the appearance with the outlying buildings already there, although relatively smaller in size in comparison. We are looking to reinstate the orchard and add a few more fruit trees, which possibly could come into fruition with the product in later years. In regard to some of the comments you made earlier, the farm is part of the Glastier project, Welsh Government project for the last 15 years. We have planted over 5,000 metres of hedgerows. We've got 6,000 metres of streamside corridors. We've done tree planting, ponds, as you would have seen yesterday. So we are at the forefront of the environment, and that's the key to our business and the farm. We've spoken to local hospitality businesses who are looking to stock this spring water. They are eagerly awaiting the opportunity to do so. And that is what we're about, supporting Monmouthshire's food and drink. And reminding people to buy local, support local, and shop local. As from the comments from the floor earlier about the water supply, which obviously isn't a planning issue, but I'm happy to address, it is our own personal private supply in a 250-acre block of land. At present, we utilise the water from farming practices. We are at the level we do not need an abstraction licence. We have consulted with NRW and the Environmental Health and have had the water tested and early stage of communications. Our spring water emerges out of the ground naturally, 24 hours a day, 360 days of the year. We are not looking at putting in boreholes 100 to 200 metres down into the aquifer and naturally taking water. This water is naturally coming out of the ground. We put it in a storage tank, which is then taken the 700 metres gravity to the farm. If this water is not used, it's returned back into the stream or the ground.
You've got 30 seconds, Mark.
We have a fully costed business plan, which we shared with your colleagues, and clearly this could not be made public due to the commercially sensitive information. But I want to assure you that we're going to put a lot of money into this project. This isn't just a shot in the dark. This is something that's been the planning for years to even get to this stage. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do hope you're able to support this application today. This isn't just any plan application. It is an opportunity to sustain a family farm and to give my children, Lottie and Sonny, the local community, and even you, the members, something you're proud of in years to come.
Thanks very much. We've got a slight technical problem with the camera, so from now on, I think we're going to have to use the mics over there. Okay, thanks very much. So we were there yesterday. We had a good look at the site. Most of us managed to get onto the site visit. The next person who got to speak is Councillor McKenna. Jane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy, for your presentation. I was surprised to see this application come before us due to so few objections, just 3 in total. However, I've looked through the objections and noted concerns around water supply, growth of business, highways and noise. Yesterday, when we visited the site, it was clear to see that there were no close neighbours, with the nearest being half a kilometre away. I agree with the Environmental Health Officer that there is sufficient distance for any neighbours not to be affected by noise pollution. That said, as we saw yesterday, Tump Farm is a working farm with turkeys, sheep, cattle and farm machinery working. So in short, the site is already emits a certain level of noise due to its working nature. Objections have mentioned water supply being affected. However, these residents have their own water supply via boreholes, so therefore will not be impacted upon. Furthermore, the farm is surrounded by approximately 250 acres, and therefore during periods of rainfall, there will be considerable runoff, which is likely to be much more than required. With all that said, the extraction of water is not a planning consideration, so it is not something for us as members to consider today. The site is accessed via the highway that runs from Wentwood to Usk, and I would consider this to be a good road for motor vehicles to use. Furthermore, I noticed yesterday that the driveway entrance has a large visibility display, and therefore visibility is good when entering and exiting the site. The officer's report states that it is anticipated that only one heavy goods vehicle lorry and 3 small vans per week will visit the site, and therefore this will have very little impact on the highway and the volume of traffic. Highways have raised concerns if the site was to expand. However, that is just speculation, and we have to look at the application that is actually before us today. What I do actually see in front of me is a small startup family business, which is a low-key development. It constitutes a small, low-impact building, which will have very little detrimental visual impact on the open countryside. It is low in height, and due to its juniper green colour and type of materials, it will blend in with the surrounding agricultural buildings within the existing farm complex. I am pleased to learn that there will be additional planting around the building and into the orchard to provide the fruit for the flavouring of the water in the future. This not only has the benefit of low carbon emissions, but it will enhance the visual impact of the area and also be of biodiversity benefit by way of providing wildlife with food, shelter and habitat. I note that section 6.22 of the report mentions energy, and I noticed that locally sourced timber is to be used. I do have a question around this, and maybe either the applicant or Amy will be able to answer this. I was wondering if there was more detail as to what type of renewable energy or sustainable methods are to be used, please. Farmers do need to diversify. This is a multi-generational family farm, and an income needs to be derived from the land, not just for a sole person, but for several. There is a common misconception that farmers are wealthy, but in reality, they may be asset rich, but cash poor. Without cash, members of the farming community cannot survive, and therefore they need to come up with innovative and sustainable ways such as this to survive. With Monmouthshire being a rural county, we need to support start-up businesses such as this one, and I therefore welcome and encourage applications such as this. I support this application and propose that it is approved as per the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And Councillor Pell-Moyne.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation, Dave. I was there yesterday with the others, and we were quite, I should say, slightly amused by the turkeys that were gobbling there, and they were making more noise, I'm sure, than any of this canning's going to make, but that's just beside. I think it's a great idea. You have spring water there, which is overflowing because they take the tank full and there's more spare and there's more than they need. It's not going to affect anybody else because it's on their ground, their spring water. And to have water used to this way is so much better because we're being encouraged all the time to drink more water, and how much better if you can have it slightly flavoured and more enhancing to get people to drink, because a lot of youngsters don't want to drink plain water out of the tap. So I think it's a very good venture. The building itself is great because it's going to be set into the ground, so in actual fact it'll just feel like a continuation of the roof of the barn that's already there going down lower. So that's not going to be an eyesore. And the amount of traffic I don't think is going to be at all detrimental, because there's probably more traffic than that going into various farms anyway during the week. I think it's a very good idea, and I'm sorry that some of the neighbours are not liking it. I think what it is, it's always the thing, you're frightened of the unknown. But I'm sure that this is going to be a wonderful business, and I hope that it progresses in the future. So I would support it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Callard, then.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amy, for the presentation as well. Looking at this application, I can't find a reason to object to it. For the objectors worried about the water supply, I just want to say I hear you and I hear your concerns, but unfortunately, as you've heard, that's not something that this committee can take into account. One thing I would like to mention is that looking at satellite images of the farm and looking at the application, I can't see any solar panels or any other renewable energy sources. Kind of backs up what Councillor McKenna was saying about how it's going to be powered. If it's going to be biomass, I would say a solar array is definitely preferable to that in terms of its environmental footprint. So it would be really encouraging to see in future, things like that added to these sorts of developments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Got another speaker on my list now. Sue, Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Amy, for the presentation. That was really helpful. And going out and viewing the farm was also enlightening yesterday. Farms do need to, the farming community are up against it at the moment, and it's good to see a well-researched planned business venture. I'll echo my colleague Ben's remarks that concerns about the water we can't consider here anyway in this, in terms of planning. And then really a question for Amy, just to refresh me. When we visited the site, the proposed placing of the new building is on a raised piece of ground, much higher than the adjacent building. Can you reassure us that it's in the planning that we will, I hope, approve that it will be recessed back into the ground, so no higher than the adjacent building? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I got nobody else indicating that they want to speak. So, Amy, would you like to pick up the points?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I've made comments of all the questions, so hopefully I'll get through all of them now. So firstly, there's references to the policy background. So policy RE3 relates to agricultural diversification, and there are a number of criteria to fulfil in relation to that policy, 3 of which are not relevant in this instance, but the others are all, the application does meet all of those requirements in that the proposed non-agricultural development is run in conjunction and complementary to the activities on the site at the present, that it's supported by a business case, that it can demonstrate that all the existing buildings are being used and where new build is required, and that proposals for proposals for new build development meet the criteria set out in LC1, which are the landscape policies. So in terms of the policy framework for this application, it is supported and it is policy compliant. In relation to point 2, in terms of scalability of the business, we talked about this on site. It's a good point that's been raised today. So the equipment proposed within the building can can up to 8,000 cans a day, which would equate to the 1 HGV and 3 vehicle van movements per week, which the highways officer is more than satisfied with. In terms of production and highways impact, the operation is considered acceptable as it's put forward to today. There is also a condition for the limitation of the use within this building. So if the business expands, a new building would be required, which would then require a subsequent planning application. And in addition, the noise management plan requires operating hours to be specified and adhered to, so the daily operation isn't unsuitable. There is obviously the reference to water abstraction, which we've made clear today is not part of the consideration of this application and is dealt with through Natural Resources Wales. In terms of biodiversity, the land is grazed, has a limited ecological value in itself, and there are biodiversity enhancements shown as per the site plan in terms of tree planting, which is considered acceptable, and again, no objections raised from Natural Resources Wales. Lastly then, in relation to energy efficiency measures, I think it's a very good question and very important. Unfortunately, the policy requirements at present can't prescribe that we have to set a certain level of energy efficiency of buildings. However, that is managed through building regs. But I ask the applicant whether they could elaborate. They have made a commitment that the building will be environmentally friendly. Anything over and above this would be beneficial. So if I pass over to you to answer that question if possible.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the couple of points then. One is going to be cut in level with the other buildings, so it's going to be on the uniform level, not obviously what you saw then yesterday. The second part was the 8,000 cans a day. That is a maximum of the machine we were looking at. So, and this could be like year 3. You know, we've got to be realistic as well. It's not going to happen, you know, if it was passed for years anyway, is it? I also forgot out my my notes then to this afternoon that we're going to put solar PV on the roof, and there's rainwater harvesting just like we got on the building, which is already next door. But the only thing I'd like to do with the solar PV is just leave it, you know, possibly for like 2 years, just because the costs, you know, are going to run away. So I'd like to just have the opportunity to bring that in. We want to do, but not straight away. I think that, the other thing was the cladding. We were going to go sustainable local wood cladding just on the front of the building, and then the Jupiter Green 40mm insulated panels around the outside. That wasn't for the noise, that was basically for the cleanliness and to keep the white perspex on the inside to keep it clean. But obviously it will do the 2 points like some people would require, and that will be for the building as well. Obviously water will help it be frost proof as well then. And that'll be in Jupiter Green 3 sides to match the other buildings, as we thought local wood that it would look a bit funny all being wood, to be honest with you.
Do you want to pick up on?
Yeah, sorry, I missed one question off, which was the sections, and which was mentioned there. Yes, as we saw yesterday, the bank goes up adjacent to the existing building. It is proposed that the building will be cut into that bank, so there is a proposed condition to require a full section drawing of showing the level of cut and the retaining wall and how that retaining wall would be constructed. It's anticipated that it match the existing arrangements in blockwork with a timber post and rail fence, but we need that clarified on a drawing, which will be as a condition to discharge. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And I've got nobody else indicating that they want to speak now. I think we've given that a pretty good airing. So, Nicola, can you put the vote up, please? Yes, Amy's just reminded me that there were additional conditions imposed to that. So if you can just bear that in mind. And Amy, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Could I just clarify? Yes. I've just, on the elevation drawings, I don't know whether you could put them up on the presentation, please, that it is shown as juniper green metal sheeting for all elevations on the building. So if we were to be looking at timber cladding, which potentially be acceptable, that would need to be considered separately as part of an amendment to the plans. The plans that are before you today show green metal cladding to all elevations, just to clarify that.
Do you want that to come to the dedicated panel? Or can we just do it anyway? Because I think everybody would be happy with that. Getting nods around the room.
I think we'd be happy to seek an amended plan to show the timber cladding on the one elevation that would then go to delegated panel.
Okay, that's fine. In that case, the voting is in the chat. Can everybody vote now, please? Joe?
Yep, that's been approved.
Okay, thank you. I'm in trouble with this, so I could keep pushing it, and it's not always catching. So just to repeat, the full planning application for the change of use of the Visitors Centre at Langdedford to allow the building to be used for meetings, functions and events, and to extend the opening hours approved under the previous planning permission. The officer presenting this is Phil Thomas. So, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So, as said, we'll take the two applications together, although I will obviously differentiate between the two during my presentation. So that's a slide there you can see in the presentation of the reservoir. And just going back, Andrew. On the right-hand side, there you can see the visitor centre building with the white roof there, and then the water sports centre just to its north there in the distance. So if we go to the next slide. That's the visitor centre building. So if we just rest on that for a moment. So Llandegford Reservoir is designated as a site of special scientific interest, or SSSI as I will call it from now on, for its wintering wildfowl. The visitor centre currently benefits from planning permission for that visitor centre, incorporating a cafe and exhibition space, ranger offices and facilities for anglers. Condition 7 of the approved permission means that the premises cannot be used for their approved purposes outside the times of 7:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock in the evening. It's proposed under this application to increase the use of the visitor centre so it can be used by Welsh Water for a wider range of uses, as well as extending the operational hours of the site from 6 a.m. to midnight potentially. Currently, the visitor centre operates as a first point of information for visitors to site. So you can just continue through the slide. That's the back of it, as viewed from the walkway down. That's internal view of the cafe, overlooking the balcony and over to the other side of the reservoir. That's a floor plan of it. And that's showing the cafe area. And then that's the front elevation, which faces the water. You see the roof and the balcony. That's the rear as you come down from the car park. Those are the side elevations. See how it's set into the bank with the roadway in front. And then that's a sort of summary of the issues. So, as I say, it's a first point of information for visitors to site, offering a takeaway coffee shop. It also acts as a point for inquiries, bookings, and issues permits for fishing, hire of boats, etc. In addition, the building houses the first floor cafe facility with over 100 covers both inside and outside on the balcony, which many of us are familiar with. The cafe offers hot and cold food and drinks. In addition, management and administrative staff are housed in the building, as well as storage and welfare facilities. The cafe facilities are open to the public at the same time as the current opening site hours, although it chooses, as far as I'm aware, to close at 6 p.m, so earlier than the 9 o'clock it could open till. In addition to maintaining and growing the activities described above, it would be intended that the extension of the use would allow for the exclusive hire of the cafe and takeaway coffee area outside the normal hours of operation of the site. So that's currently, as I say, 9 a.m. till 6 p.m, although it could stay open, as I've said, till 9 p.m. at the moment. This would allow for the hire of these spaces for a range of meetings, functions, and similar activities. Those could include meetings, for instance, Welsh Water employee meetings, ranging from team meetings, management and project meetings to board of director meetings. External groups. The spaces could be used as a hireable space for meetings and events held by a range of groups. Sporting groups as part of pre- or post-activity socialising. General public hire, functions for local organisations and family occasions. Opportunities for community engagement. And wildlife or environmental ramblers and other specialist groups could meet there, and there could be organised events and displays held there. It's also proposed that the balcony of the visitor centre is used as an overspill area in conjunction with the use of the meeting facilities. The terrace would not be accessible for functions after 11 p.m, and there would be no live or recorded music in outdoor areas. The above uses would not require any alteration to the building itself, only an extension to the use of the building. Any functions would be catered for by the existing on-site catering facilities, toilets and car parking areas. So if we could move on to the next set of photographs, please, Andrew. Yeah, so there's the Water Sports Centre there. There's a concurrent application to also extend the range of uses of the Water Sports Centre submitted under planning application 2020-00763. The Visitor Centre and Water Sports Centre facilities will be used independently throughout the year, and for the majority of events that would be the case, although they could be used concurrently should a larger event be required to use the larger site, although this is likely to be infrequent. The water sports facility currently benefits from a planning permission approved in December 2012, comprising of changing rooms, equipment store, shop, and above a multi-purpose function room. Condition 6 of that approved permission reads, the premises shall not be used solely in association with the operation, shall be used solely in association with the operation of the water sports facilities at the site. And for the avoidance of doubt, the building shall not be available as a licensed premises for use by the general public. And condition 7 reads, the premises shall not be used for the approved purposes outside the times of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So the above conditions were imposed on the planning decision to ensure that no alternative use is made of the premises which would be likely to harm either residential amenity or nature conservation. However, there are many days in the water sports season, that's from the 1st of March to the 31st of October, when the multifunctional room, referred to in the description of development, is not in use. During the off-season, that's the 1st of November to the 28th of February, the existing planning conditions mean the building should not be used at all. The intention of this application, therefore, is to promote flexible use of that building to reduce the periods when the building is unoccupied and to make the facility an ongoing asset to Welsh Water, expanding the services on offer at the reservoir. It's proposed under this application to increase the use of the facility so it can be used for a wider array of uses, as well as extending the operational hours of the site from potentially 6 o'clock in the morning till midnight. The range of uses is set out in the officer report, but relates primarily to water-based activities. So if we could just run through the photos, please. Yeah, the slide, sorry. So yeah, there's the floor plan of the building. That's the ground floor, and then there's the first floor, which you can see where the function room is. And then that's a roof plan. That's showing the balcony and the elevation facing the water. Those are the side elevations. And then that's the rear. And then that's a slide with a summary of the issues. So there have been a significant number of objections to the proposal involving issues raised such as potentially adverse impact on the diverse wildlife using the SSSI, but particularly the bird population, impacts on amenity, such as noise from the extended activities, light spillage, and the greater use of the narrow road network serving the site. In terms of the proposal's impact, clearly the visitor centre building and the water sports centre are already in place and could be used for catering and water sports related uses already, but within a narrower time frame. The extended uses for meetings and other events are considered to be acceptable in principle, subject to the impact of the extended uses and hours not harming the integrity of the SSSI, local amenity or highway safety. In terms of the impact on biodiversity, the proposals are intended to expand the water and land-based activities available to the public, which will, by their nature, attract more people, a wider range of activities and longer duration of these throughout the day and the year. Land-only activities are currently permitted during the winter months, that's the 1st of November to the 28th of February. The impacts of the proposals are predicted to arise from additional disturbance by way of noise, visual impacts and lighting that could impact on the SSSI. And again, I mentioned primarily the overwintering birds, but it could also affect other birds, bats, badgers and otter. Increased noise from vehicles, people and any PA equipment are of a particular concern for the key species noted above. Traffic could also be an issue for road mortality of species such as otter and badger. Following an iterative process involving wildlife survey work, noise assessment and refinement of the proposed event management plans, NRW and the Council's Biodiversity Officer conclude that despite flaws in the survey and assessments, with the imposition of strict management limitations that include no outdoor activities throughout the main overwintering period, that's November to February, and a restriction on indoor events over the same period until a wintering bird monitoring programme has been submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority, it's considered that the application is not likely to have an adverse impact on features of the SSSI. NRW and the Council's ecologists emphasise that it's critical that the results of the bird monitoring are linked to potential curtailment of operations at the site. For instance, it could involve reducing the frequency or type of events held, and therefore the wording of condition 4 for each of the two applications includes this element of control as requested by our specialist advisors. There are opportunities for otter to maintain north-south movement in the wider catchment. However, there is some potential for increased otter road mortality associated with an increase in vehicle movements. It's noted that the site event management plans refer to monitoring of road mortality in relation to events. This needs to be linked to action if road mortality becomes an issue. And a separate planning condition is recommended for this should members be minded to approve the application. As set out in late correspondence, given the extended opening times into the later evening, it is advised that a light management condition be imposed to ensure light spillage is kept to a reasonable level. Unbalanced, therefore, and only subject to the strict conditions recommended, it is considered that the proposed additional use of the visitor centre and the water sports centre should not adversely affect the SSSI itself, or the European marine site, or protected species, and would meet the requirements of LDP policy NE1. In terms of amenity, noise impact assessments have been carried out by Welsh Waters consultants to assess the concerns that have been expressed about the potential effects of noise arising from the extended hours of use of the buildings intended to operate as a meeting space and functions venue. As the nearest residential property is located over 400 metres from the facility, any noise generated within the facility is not likely to have a harmful effect on the amenity of any residents. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has commented that they have no objections to the application. Although it's agreed by the applicant and detailed in both their noise impact assessments and site management plan, they would suggest that if planning permission is granted, the following conditions be included. 1. Outdoor events are limited to 12 per year and must finish, including the use of amplified recorded music, and PA systems no later than 5 o'clock. All outdoor events be subject to a noise management plan submitted by the applicant to be approved by the local planning authority. And 3. All indoor events at both the visitor centre and the water sports centre, including any amplified recorded live music, should finish no later than 11 p.m. So it's agreed that the suggested conditions 1 and 3 above should be attached to any consent that members are minded to approve. However, with regards to point 2 about all outdoor events being subject to a noise management plan, given the other restrictions suggested to limit noise, including the limit on a number of events, and the fact there'll be no PA system for music outside, to require a noise management plan for every outdoor event is considered too onerous on the developer and is not considered reasonable or necessary in this instance. The application has a potential to increase vehicular traffic to and from the reservoir. However, this will be small scale when considering the number of vehicular movements associated with the current use of the facilities. MCC Highways did not raise any objections to the previously submitted Section 73 application, and it was agreed that the later opening hours would not cause any detrimental highway impacts. On this basis, the application is considered to be compatible with Planning Policy Wales and LDP policies S16 and MV1. The removal of the outdoor live or recorded music element of the proposed use is included in the latest management plans submitted by the applicant. Both NRW and the Council's Biodiversity Officer advise that the management plans should be referred to as approved documents in any approval notice. On this basis, the contents are part of the approval and will be binding on the applicant. But a condition to ensure that there's no amplified music played outdoors is also recommended. Concerns have been made with regard to the impact on the rural economy and in particular other venues in close proximity. The nearest venue that offers space that could be used for meetings, functions and events is the Carpenter's Arms in Coed-y-Pain, which is very near. Whilst there are therefore overlapping services that each would offer, the two venues are not directly comparable and both would offer various other services and functions that the other does not. Policy CRF1 of the LDP seeks to retain existing facilities for communities rather than preclude other sites providing some comparable services. Planning Policy Wales also makes it clear that it is not the role of the planning system to restrict competition. It's unlikely that the increased use of the water sports building would have an impact on water sports users, as the two activities would not overlap. For example, the equipment stores and changing areas would not be used for corporate events, meetings, or family events. Subject to the comprehensive set of conditions listed in the report and late correspondence, it is considered that the proposal to increase the use of the two buildings would be in accordance with national and local planning policies, and subject to the imposition of the strict planning conditions should not harm the amenity of local residents, highway safety, or the qualities of the SSSI and the wildlife that use it. So we would recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And we've got objections from many sources, as you said, including Llangibby Vale Community Council. I think Councillor Graham Rogers is here, and Graham, you wanted to speak, so you've got 4 minutes, and do it from there, please, because of the camera situation. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I've just realised I've missed the local member, so I'll bring Graham first. Yeah, okay, right. Go on, Graham.
Thank you. Llangibby Community Council has a number of concerns regarding the effect these applications will have on the way in which the site is used in future in terms of the extended hours and the types of use that is proposed. For example, the commercialisation proposed will impact on users of the Water Sports Centre, which was originally granted permission for the exclusive use for water-based activities. There is also the impact on local residents in terms of noise, light pollution, traffic, and the general well-being of those that come to the reservoir to walk or just sit quietly and enjoy being at one with nature. These are important considerations. However, I want to focus on another aspect of major concern. You will all have visited the site and seen what a stunning environmental asset we have in our midst. For over 50 years, visitors have discovered and enjoyed the tranquility of this unique location. Amongst these visitors are countless local residents, but also many visitors from further afield. Over the years, these have included widgeon, tufted duck, teal, gadwall, pintail, and even Buick swans. It is because of the importance of this site to these visitors that the reservoir and surrounding land has been designated a site of special scientific interest. The Planning Officer in her report reminds us that the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, as amended by the Countryside and Rights of Ways Act 2000, places a duty on all public bodies, including planning authorities, to take reasonable steps consistent with the proper exercise of their functions to further the conservation and enhancement of the features by reason of which an SSSI is of special interest. And this is reflected in Planning Policy Wales 11. PPW Wales 11 states that there is a presumption against development likely to damage an SSSI. In this context, I would like to draw your attention to the recent ministerial statement by Julie James, the Senedd member for climate change, in which she proposes that the policy protection afforded to SSSIs, as outlined in Planning Policy Wales 11, needs to be strengthened. So when you come to decide on these applications, you need to ask yourselves, will the proposals in these applications enhance the site as an SSSI? We think the answer must be no. So will they damage the site as an SSSI?
You've got 1 minute, Graham.
By disturbing the overwintering birds. Although the planning officer thinks it is not likely, hardly a ringing endorsement, especially as this opinion is based on a wintering bird survey, which she admits in her report to you is lacking in robustness, while more knowledgeable people than me in these matters have dismissed it as inadequate. Given the direction that Julie James wants to take us, are you content that granting these applications will be following the right path and not damage the site as an SSSI? We hope you reach the right conclusion in this regard. However, if despite this you are minded to grant these applications, may we suggest at least one further condition in addition to those proposed by the planning officer, namely that there should be no indoor events extending after 5 p.m. in the period 1st of November to 28th of February in the succeeding year to minimise the risk of disturbing the overwintering birds. Thank you.
You've practiced that, haven't you? Right. I'm going to swap microphone. I keep pressing that one, and it pleases itself whether it comes on or not. Faye.
Thank you, Chair, and again, good afternoon, colleagues. I have grave concerns with these applications, and I would urge members to defer the applications until relevant surveys requested or more in-depth surveys have been undertaken. As we are all aware, Llandegfed Reservoir is a site of special interest. I ask the committee, as we move through our debate, to ask yourselves if these applications are warranted and if you think it will have a detrimental impact on the wildlife that frequently use it and are protected at it. From the lengthy amount of reading we have done, colleagues, I can't see a plausible justification except for a monetary reason to extend the opening hours and to hold functions indoors and outdoors. The reservoir was never intended to hold functions, and I don't see why this has changed. I would like to clarify that I don't object to holding business meeting at the centre. However, I do object to the indoor and outdoor functions that Welsh Water are seeking. Although I agree that this site is of exceptional beauty and is enjoyed by many, do we really need to encourage more visitors and large gatherings here? It has been made apparent to all of us during lockdown that the absence of people let the wildlife flourish. I cannot agree that introducing more human activity and in some cases loud music will not have a negative impact on the wildlife that are and aren't protected by the SSSI. In 2021, the Senedd declared a nature emergency, and I can only see that this application will be an overdevelopment of an SSSI site. We should also be mindful of the recent ministerial statement on the 3rd of October stating strengthen the policy protection afforded to SSSIs as outlined in Planning Policy Wales 11. I note that a fellow local authority, Torfaen County Council, has a holding objection to this application, citing there is a lack of evidence in the surveys provided by Ricardo Energy and Environment. I feel as a committee we have a responsibility to echo the concerns of a fellow council. I can't help but agree with the comments made by Llangibby Community Council, and I will also be objecting on the grounds that these applications do not comply with planning policies. I won't repeat the report as I was running out of time, but I would express my support for their objections, and I urge the committee to also defer on these points. I would also like to point out Planning Policy 11 Wales states there is a presumption against development likely to damage a SSSI and should seek to maintain and enhance biodiversity in the exercise of their functions. I would ask the committee, if we approve this application, are we complying with planning policies? I again note objections from Natural Resource Wales. Given that the site is a SSSI and an SLA, I can't see that these concerns have been mitigated against. I respectfully have to disagree with Highways not having an objection to this application. I frequently visit the site, and as members would have seen from site visits, the reservoir is only accessed via windy and sometimes single-track country lanes. As stated in the officer's report, there is no public transport to the reservoir, and it notes that users will be doing so in their own cars, or if for functions, I can only assume sometimes a minibus. This in turn poses a threat to the wildlife, most notably to badgers and otters, especially if said vehicular movements are in the later evenings or early mornings, that being past 12 AM when it is dark. It was very upsetting to read that these increased vehicular movements will cause increased fatalities of otters and badgers. Surely, colleagues, on this point alone, we should reject this application. I understand from the officer's reports these fatalities will be recorded. However, my objection to this is that we will always be looking back at data when the fatalities have already taken place. And are we, as a committee, happy with this? There has been, in my opinion, no mitigation put in place for this, and it concerns me that we will always be looking back at these fatalities retrospectively. I would expect Welsh Water to have a strategy put in place for this. I also can't agree that these vehicular movements won't impact residents negatively. This could potentially...
Your second period now.
This could potentially be large amounts of traffic late at night on roads that don't see vehicles during antisocial hours, which 12 AM is antisocial. Another concern for me was the lack of wintering bird surveys that were conducted. How, as a committee, are we supposed to make a decision regarding a site of special interest when all parties objecting, and even MCC have acknowledged the lack of surveys conducted? As stated in the report, a total of 10 wintering birds were undertaken between October 2021 and March 2022. Although it had previously requested by the Council's biodiversity officer that 2 wintering bird surveys per month were undertaken during both October and December, only a single survey was undertaken. This simply isn't good enough, and to me shows a complete disregard and lack of empathy towards the status of this site and our environment and wildlife.
You've got
Again,
1 minute left.
This is another reason to defer this application until we have the relevant surveys. Do I get 12 minutes? Because it's 2. Can I, please?
I knew you were going to say that.
Thanks, thank you. I was also concerned that when the sound tests were carried out, there was, and I quote, noticeable behavioural changes in mallards. So regardless of any justifications, animals were actively removing themselves from a disturbance to them. And these were just sound tests done over a short period of time. To even suggest that loud, granted maybe not loud to us, but to an animal, will have anything but a negative effect is irresponsible. And I fear if we permit this application, the damage to this site will be irreversible, or these applications, sorry. There are objections on the applications from notable organisations such as Gwent Wildlife Trust, Gwent Ornithological Society, Torfaen Friends of the Earth, Usk Civic Society and Coed Pain Residents Association. Colleagues, I urge you to take these objections seriously. These are learned custodians of our environment and wildlife, and we are just that as elected members, custodians of our environment. I would ask the committee during the debates to pay attention to the letter submitted by the Coed Pain Residents Association on the 23rd of August 21. These voluntary people who have invested hours into this have the same concerns for over 12 months. Again, this simply isn't good enough. If members are minded to grant permission, I would ask that we make some amendments to the conditions. Firstly, relating to conditions 2 and 3, I would request that the development will only start once reports mentioned in condition 4 have been supplied and reviewed by the planning authority, and we remove the wording in the subsequent year. I have read no report where the phrase subsequent year has been mentioned, so I therefore wonder why officers have added this in. Secondly, I have issues with condition 10. As noted in late correspondence supplied by the Craig Payne Residents Association, there is already an ongoing issue. I would ask that officers investigate this and clarify how we as a committee can be satisfied that the light spillage shown has not already had an adverse effect on wildlife, especially bats. And secondly, how can we condition an enforcement when an enforcement of a previous condition has not been enforced? There were specific reasons as to why conditions were imposed on previous applications. Why are these now not warranted? Welsh Water have shown that they don't comply with conditions. So how as a committee can we guarantee these conditions will be adhered to and even enforced? I would finally finish by saying I will not be supporting these applications at present, and I hope colleagues agree that there hasn't been enough robust research to show the SSSI here will not be adversely affected or protected. So again, I urge to defer these applications to the delegated panel or ask that they are brought before a later committee. I would also like to point out to the committee that we have still been receiving objections to these applications via late correspondence, and I would highlight the concerns over the inconsistency of reports from MCC and from Welsh Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonfield. You certainly used your 8.5 minutes. But yes, they were two applications together, so that's fair enough. I've got a video that, Craig, are you going to be doing that from Nicholas Morley on behalf of the objectors?
Yes, Chair, if you just give me a couple of minutes.
I take it officers will be picking up the points after all of these speakers.
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
Yeah. We did actually defer this last year for 12 months for additional reports. So
that's what concerns me,
yeah.
is that it already has been, there's still the same concerns.
Right, let me just see if the sound works.
Hello from Llantegfell. My name is Nick Morley, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Craig Payne Residents Association. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'll try to keep it brief. Our objections are simple, but not adequately addressed in the case officer's report. We're aware that you have a lot of documents to consider. Please may we reiterate our objection to both applications, DM 2020 762 and 763. I really hope for your sake that you don't have to watch me twice. We're objecting because we believe that the proposed changes would damage the special tranquility and wildlife here, as well as threatening the existing activities in the visitor centre and the water sports centre. A clear majority of our members have expressed opposition, and you will have seen that reflected in the number of personal objections posted online and the objections to previous similar applications since 2012, which we detailed in our letter. I'm afraid that the applicants, whose bills we all pay, are making rather a lot of work for us, not least by withdrawing and resubmitting similar applications, but also including a couple of good ideas in their complex proposals, which are nonetheless too far-reaching and therefore unreasonable. The restrictions they address are recent, and they seem carefully aligned with the design and position of the building. They were justified by documents gathered for a committee like this in 2012. Although we now have new professional reports supporting these applications, I'm afraid we don't recognise any new ideas or arguments or any relevant change of circumstances to indicate that the previous reports and the current restrictions are wrong. All of us in Craig Payne count ourselves lucky to live in this beautiful corner of Monmouthshire. Many of us walk near the shores of the lake, and some sail, paddle or fish here as well. The restaurant was popular in the past, and the takeaway coffee shop has been my first excursion after each of the 3 lockdowns. The wildlife is wonderful and varied in this SSSI, with plausible rumours of otters near the northern end, and some of us were lucky enough to catch a glimpse of a migrating osprey in 2018. It's simply not credible to propose that additional human activity for additional hours with additional traffic, parking, goods vehicles, additional noise and lighting will not affect this fragile and precious ecology. I'm at the lake this weekend, Sunday morning, to help out with the Welsh Topper Sailing Championship that the local sailing club are hosting. Youngsters and their supporters from all over Wales and beyond are competing with locals who learned here. It's a pleasure to support young people engaged like this out in the fresh air without a single computer screen or noisy engine between them. And there has been loads of other activity on and in the water based from the Water Sports Centre. Allowing these buildings to host other commercial functions would inevitably interfere with the current uses, disrupting public access to the cafe, information resources, and the Water Sports Centre. Beyond the buildings themselves, at peak times, the site car parks already overflow and the reservoir is only reachable by single track lanes, already too dangerous for our children to cycle on. In conclusion, may I thank you all for your kind attention and the care that you take considering these applications. We love the way the reservoir works in balance with nature in this tranquil spot. But despite some attempts at assurance, we still strongly object to these proposals because they are designed to add more people, more traffic, more noise, more of the day, and those will damage the resilience of the natural environment and the well-being of visitors and neighbours. Thank you.
Okay, we've now got Dylan Green, the applicant's agent. Dylan, do you want to do it from up there?
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, diolch Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee, for the opportunity to speak today in support of the full planning application for the change of use of the Visitor Centre and the Water Sports Centre at Llandegfedd. Thanks also to the Officer for a very thorough account of the planning applications. And as the Planning Officer confirms within the committee report, the Visitor Centre and Water Sports Centre at Llandegfedd already benefits from planning permission for it to be used as a cafe and exhibition space. So the principle of such functions within the Visitor Centre has already been agreed and established. The Officer also confirms that the proposed extension of opening hours and expansion of the functions of the centre does not fundamentally change the use of the building. As such, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. It is noted that there have been objections from various consultees due mainly to the reservoir's designation as a SSSI. However, Dŵr Cymru have liaised closely with Monmouthshire County Council throughout the duration of the application and have fully adhered to all requests and agreed to carry out further assessments to ensure that the impact of development has been fully mitigated. This is demonstrated within the committee report, as many of the initial objections from statutory consultees have been removed to reflect the additional assessments that have been submitted. Accordingly, NRW welcomes the overwintering bird survey work and overall agree with its conclusions. They are satisfied that initial concerns can be overcome and consider that damage to the features for which Llandegfedd Reservoir SSSI is of special interest can be avoided if the proposed mitigation measures are implemented. This view is shared with Monmouthshire Council's biodiversity team, who offer no objection, and confirms with the imposition of strict management limitations that include no outdoor activities throughout the main overwintering bird season, which is from November to February, that the application is not deemed to have an adverse impact on the features of the SSSI. Furthermore, the Council's Highways Department does not consider that the proposed change will be detrimental to highway safety or capacity on the immediate local highway network, and the Environmental Health Officer confirms that based on the new information supplied, they have no objections to this application. Whilst the planning application is for year-round use of the buildings, any activity undertaken on the site would be primarily in line with the conditions of the SSSI for Llandegfedd, which Dŵr Cymru upholds to the best of its ability as stewards on the site. In conjunction with the additional assessments, Dŵr Cymru have confirmed that Llandegfedd will not conduct any events with live or recorded music externally, and indoor music will be limited to an 11 PM cut-off time. In terms of the impact of the change in opening hours, noise impact assessments have been carried out, which concludes as the nearest residential property is over 400 metres from the site. On the other side of the reservoir, any noise generated from the facility will have a negligible effect on the amenity of residents. Furthermore, overwintering bird surveys have been carried out to assess the impact of the application on the bird population within the SSSI, and the methodology was agreed with Monmouthshire Council and NRW, and the survey concludes that with the imposition of the suggested conditions, then it is not anticipated that elevated noise levels will result in a significant impact on waterfowl abundance at Llandegfedd. Llandegfedd Reservoir is considered to be a green infrastructure asset that should be open to the public to enjoy, As is referred to within the Officer's committee report, this ties into the aspirations of Planning Policy Wales in relation to placemaking and contributes to the 7 goals of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. As places can promote...
1 minute left, Dylan.
Okay, thanks. Places can promote social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being by providing well-connected, cohesive communities. In terms of other matters raised by objectors, safety of people using the visitor centre for events and the potential behaviour of the public is not material planning consideration, and I think the other points raised have been dealt with sufficiently within the Officer's report. To conclude, therefore, the permission includes a number of planning conditions which makes the development acceptable. The decision to withdraw live music from external events, which was the main issue for a number of consultees, has been welcomed, and the committee report that confirms that subject to conditions is considered the proposed additional use of the visitor centre will not adversely affect the SSSI itself. And just in terms of deferring the application, condition 4 would restrict events from 1st November to 28th of February in the succeeding year, so following year. So until a winter and bird monitoring programme has been submitted. So that's already been dealt with in terms of the existing application. And so I therefore ask you as members of the Planning Committee to support the Officer's recommendation and grant full planning permission for the development as proposed. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Again, I'll give the officers the opportunity of coming in now, or do you want to after members have spoken?
Yeah, I think we'll. It's probably easier if I listen to members, what members have got to say, and then deal with them in one chunk.
Okay. Well, this is a very heavily conditioned report, but we still need to give it quite a lot of consideration, I think. The next person on my list is Councillor Callard. Ben?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Phil, for the presentation, and thanks for you guys for coming along and making representations. Bit of a tricky one, I think, this one for the committee, because we've got a number of different bodies who seem to have conflicting opinions about the impact that this development is going to have. NRW and MCC on one hand, and then a lot of wildlife charities on the other hand. I tend to approach it as, what have we got to lose and what have we got to gain? And you know, it's difficult because the information we get, but we could potentially be causing a lot of damage to our wildlife populations for an additional few hours opening once a month in a you know, in a social setting. And I suppose the other side of that coin is that this is so heavily conditioned that you can have an event once a month until midnight. Is that correct? Phil, is that correct? Is it?
Internally, yes. Obviously, not externally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I hear what Councillor Bromfield says, and I hear what the other contributors say, and I'd be interested in what the other members of the committee think. I've got a couple of questions for you, Phil, on it. One of them is that we've got 2 separate applications here. The applications were for 12 events a year. Is that at each premises? And can they run concurrently? So could you have 2 events on at the same time, at the same, you know, on the same evening, for example? And I'd encourage members, I suppose, maybe to think of this as 2 applications, because there's the potential here to halve the impact that we have here by potentially approving one and rejecting the other. And I know what Councillor Bromfield said about deferring this, but consider it's already been deferred once. It may be best if we consider either approving it or rejecting it rather than deferring it. My other question is, we had some late correspondence about light spill onto the reservoir. I wondered, is that light spill permissible under the current planning consent, and so will it just continue under this? Because it did seem, I know photos don't often give a true reflection, but it did seem quite bad. And my final question was, the representative from Welsh Water mentioned 11 p.m. cut-off for amplified music indoors. I thought in the presentation I heard 5 p.m. cut-off for amplified music indoors. So just one of those must be right. So I'd just like to know which one. Thanks.
Do you want to do that bit now, Phil?
Yeah, it might be easy, mightn't it? Yeah. So in terms of the events, it does say 12 events for each application. So I'm assuming, yes, it would be 24 events over the year, 12. So obviously, if members think that's too many, they could come to a view on that. But what I would say is you can use, and this is external events, by the way, not internal. So the internal ones can happen more often. So it's just outside events, that is.
So they can be every night inside?
They could be, yes. Right. That's right, yeah, yeah.
Use your mic, Ben.
Yeah.
You're getting as bad as me.
So just to put it in perspective, you are allowed under permitted development rights 28 days per calendar year to use land for a specific, for a purpose. For instance, you could be, having, a children's party outside, for instance, or something like that. So that land, from what I can assess, it's not curtilage of a building. It's land associated with the reservoir. So you get up to 28 days per calendar year to use that without planning permission for a function. So this is actually more restrictive than that. It would limit it to 24 days per calendar year for a specific, for a range of uses, as they've suggested here. A lot of them in association with the use of the water as well, which they're using already, for that purpose. In terms of concurrent events, there's a condition that limits the number of those to 2. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So. Yeah, sorry, yes, and the outdoor events would have to finish at 5 o'clock in the evening as well. So, sorry, there's a condition there to that effect. But the indoor ones are obviously more flexible and could go on later, and that's where the midnight issue comes in, 11 p.m. for the music indoors. Concurrent events is a condition there towards the bottom, I think. No more than 2 concurrent events can take place. At any one time, so 2 events. So you'd have one going on at the, in the visitor centre, and one associated with the actual water sports centre. So not 3, 4, whatever. In terms of lighting, the lighting we've seen was the internal lighting from the visitor centre. We'll have to check what the actual condition says on the original planning permission. That normally seeks to control external lighting rather than internal lighting. The opportunity in this application is to actually impose a fresh condition where we could actually try and control some of the internal lighting as well, so that there isn't such light spillage from the buildings. So, and that's probably in Welsh Water's interests anyway, in terms of energy efficiency, savings in cost, etc. So there's an opportunity within the scope of this application to actually manage that in a more effective manner, rather than just look, albeit importantly, at the issues of how it's affecting things like bat species, etc., which would normally be external lighting.
Yeah, but there's glass fronted.
You have to use your mic.
Sorry, if it's glass fronted, then one could argue that that is external lighting because it's shining through the glass. So, that's already going to have had an impact on the wildlife, isn't it?
There would nothing be stopping that at the moment, though, so we need to go back and check that condition. But it's very rare that we would condition internal lighting, so they could potentially leave that lighting on inevitably. So I think we need to have a look at that in terms of what the consent is. But as Phil has already alluded to, this gives us the opportunity to address that via that lighting condition, and we can review that with the applicant then moving forward. So, I mean, there has been a lot of discussion. I appreciate what the position elected members are in today with regards to the difference in views with regards to ecology and the wildlife interest on this site. It is a very sensitive site. We have discussed already that has been deferred. Applicants, your officers as members, we've been working with Welsh Water to ensure the correct survey work was done. There is a difference of opinion here with Natural Resources Wales. Your biodiversity officer has reviewed this application and considered there's no objections. There's also the difference of opinion from other professionals and other ecologists. So I appreciate the position that members are in, and you need to make a balanced decision here based on the probabilities. What I would say about this application is that there is significantly conditions. There are robust conditions there with regards to amplified music, with regards to the operating times of these change of uses. There's monitoring in there, and there's ecological enhancements for in terms of the conditions. So I really do feel as officers we've worked on your behalf as members to ensure that we can get the right compromise here with regards to ensuring that we allow development proposals which will create jobs, which will help local community in terms of that circular economy, but also ensure that we do protect and enhance the ecological value of the site. And I appreciate that this is a difficult decision. It was a difficult decision for officers in terms of coming to this recommendation, but we do feel on a balance of probabilities this is the correct recommendation for you as members, given the conditions and how restrictive moving forward the consent would be, and there would be monitoring and that sort of the ecological enhancement conditions as well. So I just wanted to pick up on those points, but as officers, we do appreciate this is a difficult decision for you as members and as a committee, and it is a balance of probabilities exercise. You could get two planning officers in the same room which have a difference of opinion, and I think that's the situation we have here. We have fallen with your biodiversity officer and with Natural Resources Wales as the national environmental regulator who obviously look after wildlife considerations. But I do appreciate this is a member decision, and that's what you have to put in the balance moving forward.
Thank you, Craig. And just to clarify on the outside events, they can't take place between the 1st of November and the 28th of Feb anyway. So the 24 potentially events, outside events, will take place if all 24 took place in a 9-month period. So that could concentrate them a bit. So you might like to consider, if you are minded to approve it, as to whether or not it's 12 overall or just 12 for the one building possibly. I don't know. That's something to consider. So the next person on my list is Councillor McKenna. Jane?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Phil, for the presentation. Where do we start with this one? Firstly, we are looking at two applications which have many complexities, updated reports and objections. The scale of the site is large, and the impact of the proposals are not just contained within the site, but also within the surrounding communities, whether that be for humans or nature. I'll be honest and say that I've found these applications both overwhelming by way of the number of objections and due to the number of revised reports. Only this morning we have continued to receive late correspondence. The local community council summarised that there are over 500 documents, nearly 400 objections, and the officer report is over 70 pages long. With so much information, I feel that a week is not long enough to read through it all, digest it and make an informed decision. I take my role as a planning committee member very seriously because I know that whatever decision I make today, it will have an impact on that site, wildlife, local residents and that of future generations. I have 2 young children and I have to consider the likes of them and their own children in the future as part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. How will this proposal affect them? What benefit will it be to them? Indeed, is there a benefit at all? I am always happy to go with the recommendations of the experts, e.g. our own ecologists here at Monsees Sea. However, I cannot ignore all of the objections or concerns from some of the initial reports from our MCC ecologists or Natural Resources Wales. Further to this, I cannot ignore the overwhelming number of objections from wildlife experts, wildlife lovers, local residents, Gwent Wildlife, Gwent Ornithological Society, Campaign for the Protection of Rural Wales, Friends of the Earth, the Torfaen County Borough Council ecologists, independent wildlife researchers, Lambgibby Fowler, Lambaddock and Pontypool Community Councils, etc. Put simply, my gut instinct tells me that so many people can't be wrong. The site is a site of special scientific interest, and I cannot ignore the impact that the proposals could have on birds, otters, bats, badgers, etc. As Councillor Bromfield has said, I was also upset to read that one of the conditions recommended by our biodiversity officer in the report in July 2022 is that, and I quote, within 3 months of the approval of this application, a scheme for the monitoring of the Slevale Road within 800 metres of the site entrance gate for evidence of otter or badger mortality shall be submitted to the LPA. The scheme shall include methods including recording and reporting mechanisms. In the event that any mortality is discovered, it will be recorded and reported to Monsees, the ecology officer. The scheme shall include details of thresholds for when remedial measures shall be agreed with the LPA and implemented by the applicant. However, what are these agreed measures and how will they stop wildlife mortality? Furthermore, this condition is a bit of a shut the stable door when the horse is already bolted, if approved. Morally and ethically, I do not feel this is right or acceptable. I note that the Minister of Climate Change has issued a statement in the last month committing the Welsh Government and local planning authorities to a greatly enhanced level of protection to SSSIs. I would welcome further information on this and therefore suggest that this application is not rushed through before having all of the information surrounding this. I have many questions surrounding this application. However, I know that my time is limited, which is why I would prefer for this application to be deferred pending further information and sufficient surveys regarding light spill and its effect on bats and birds. Surveys being done at the Green Pool, the Island, Saw Bay and Eastern Band, and not just at the Pettingdale Hyde and Burst-Hamar Hyde. Also, how is litter to be managed and sort of prevented from going into the water? I would welcome further information around what is classed as an event, how many people can the venues hold. At the event, will the public be able to access the site when events are on? And if so, what impact will that have on the highway and verges if visitors cannot park on the site due to the volume? Is it 12 events per venue or 12 events per site? Will the events be advertised to the local public because the narrow roads will be busier, etc.? Within my ward, we have a nursery which is accessed via very similar narrow country lanes as that we have at Langdedford. And I know that the residents tend to try and avoid being on the lane at around about 9 a.m. when there's a large volume of cars because it impacts on the highway. And I fear that the same sort of thing will happen here. Half of the site is in the county of Torfaen, so I would welcome, if possible, a meeting on site with Torfaen officers, NRW, the applicant and the ecologists to get a better understanding of the hides, their location and the types of wildlife. You know, we've mentioned wintering birds. What about the bird nesting season, which very often is in the springtime? Humans and nature must always try to live in balance, but I feel that this commercial venture could disrupt this to the detriment of wildlife, the SSSI and local residents. I feel that this application should be deferred pending further clarity and time to digest so much information. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor McConnell, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report and all the work that officers have put in on this. And clearly an enormous amount of work has been put in on this because it is complicated, because of possibly trying to marry up two things. This has occupied my mind more than any other planning application I've ever considered in this council or in previous places. And I've been listening with interest to the discussion today because it has bothered me, a real head scratcher. But in the end, I think it comes down to the question as to whether this is a suitable party venue. The idea of extending the use of the buildings is admirable. The site already manages to blend the use by the community of the water facilities and the great outdoors with the interests of the great outdoors and its inhabitants well, and I see no reason to get in the way of that. The idea of meetings or other events taking place in those buildings at other times is fine, but I am really bothered with the idea of this as a party venue, and I think trying to square that circle is using up an enormous amount of everybody's time, and that is my question. That is well, I would come at this fresh if I thought there was a condition that there would be no amplified music at all. I noticed, for instance, there's no amplified music outside, but that the balcony of the visitor centre, as I understand it, is allowed as an extension of the venue until 11 o'clock at night. So with the light spill out of there and music pouring out of the windows, I'd fancy we're in the same territory as external amplified music. So I think the nub of this is that my view is that this that whilst this place should serve its community as well as the community protect it, it's the benefit to the community of it being a party venue is easily outweighed by the risks which are clearly present and occupying everyone so much in terms of how to mitigate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And Councillor Oakdale.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the overwintering birds reports that was submitted, is there anything to look at the ongoing impact if this application is approved? So, for instance, we have a baseline that is being recorded, which would be the overwintering report, and are we able to then measure the impacts of the approval, if it is that over the long term, to see if there is a detrimental impact on the wildlife? I'm not going to rehash all the other arguments that everybody's already put forward, Chair. It's just an idea of how do we mitigate when we don't really know what the baseline is.
Thanks for that. I'll come back to officers to do these in a minute, because Councillor Pearl, Maureen.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of the things have been said that I was thinking about, but I look at it like this. The places of this ilk are getting less and less throughout the country. Soon we won't have any perfectly beautiful, quiet places, and we shall lose even more of our wildlife and birds. People fishing, don't interfere with them, and people out in their boats, they're getting on and they're enjoying themselves quietly. But I think if we're going to start having parties and events at night, you're going to make it too commercialised. It was said many, many, many years ago by somebody that that we will cause our own destruction in this world. And it's happening now. We know what state we're in now, how we're losing the water, the ice is melting, everything's going. Surely we want to keep things like this as long as we possibly can, and to keep them like this. Youngsters coming with their parents to have a look at areas like this, especially if they come from the middle of towns, look at it and see the beauty and see the animals. Once they've gone from there, once the birds have gone from there, you won't get them back again. And I think we've got to look at it in a longer term and try and preserve this. Sorry, that's how I feel. Yeah. So I can't support it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've got nobody else. Oh, Councillor Webb.
Yes, just quickly, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the reports and everybody else that's spoken so far. It's been an interesting debate. But in making my decision, I ask what are the advantages to the diverse wildlife, the ecology, and the activities that currently go on from day to day on the site, and to the other users, the walkers, neighbours. Seems the only advantage is to the applicant, in my view. I hate to say this, but that's my view, and I shan't be supporting it either. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. I've got nobody else on my list at the moment, so officers, would you like to come back in? And there's a couple of points there.
Yeah, there were several actually. I won't go through them all because I think a lot of it's been said already, to be honest, but or is in the report. But in terms of otter mortality, I think that, well, you take for granted there's already otters being killed on the roads already. So the point about this use from a highway perspective, that it won't significantly increase traffic over existing levels that are already using the highway network. You're not just talking about the reservoir. You're talking about users within the community using those road networks to get, for instance, from us or Coed y Pain to Pontypool and places like that and New Inn. So there will be a lot of use on that road who aren't actually using the reservoir facility. But what this opportunity does is to actually, again, offer a baseline opportunity to have a proper survey of otter mortality and actually have adjustments that can be made to this particular use if that trend seems to be going up. So again, it can help actually control reduce otter mortality in that regard. There's a large car park which should be able to cater for the users of the premises, as we've seen, and highways don't object in terms of parking. In terms of noise, that will be contained within the building. If there is an issue with intermittent noise, for instance, if windows are open for people to go out into the balcony, Environmental Health can monitor that and have a statutory noise nuisance function, so they would be able to get involved if that does become a problem. But it's also worth mentioning that Welsh Water are a responsible body. They're not a private individual, and they have a corporate responsibility to engage with the community and be considerate and responsible operators of a site. In terms of overwintering birds, there is condition 4, which Councillor Rook referred to. There is condition 4, which provides a safeguard there in terms of no use, even internal use, between the critical period of 1st of November to 28th of February shall be permitted until a wintering bird monitoring programme has been submitted to and agreed by the local planning authority, and that will be in tandem with NRW. And that was requested by NRW, who haven't ultimately objected to the application. So that provides a safeguard then in terms of future monitoring and of the use of the reservoir by those overwintering birds. And it's important to say that the reservoir is a large body of water, and a lot of the birds are actually using the body of water to the north, away from the buildings, where human activity has already taken place. So they will be able to move around that area and use the reservoir in a way that doesn't harm their integrity. But these conditions will be in place to safeguard the asset that is the SSSI and the wildfowl using them. And again, I must emphasise that NRW haven't objected to it, and they are our our expert advisors, statutory advisors, rather than an amenity group. Thank you.
Phil. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up, I can obviously sense members' concerns with regards to the wildlife interest with this application, and you're quite right in terms of the balance that needs to be made here in terms of planning policy and the Ministers for Climate Change's letter and the need to protect our SSSIs. And what this application does, what both applications do, is that we do heavily restrict these uses. And I wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Callard made about we do have 2 applications in front of us today. If members are concerned about the cumulative impact of both developments in terms of what Phil was just saying, in terms of where birds are monitoring are nesting and roosting within the reservoir. It's a large area. This area already is contained, has human activity. Would it be more appropriate for members to consider whether one of the applications is considered favourably, given the level of conditions? That might give the opportunity for the applicant to express these events, have these events to the benefits of people who are going to use those events. It might be something that members want to consider. That was mentioned earlier, and I thought I'd just raise it again. That might be a compromise and a level of consideration given the level of conditions that we have in front of us as well. I also wanted to outline to members that if you are considering not accepting officer's recommendation on this application, we have to consider then the implication of an appeal process and costs that potentially could be awarded against the local planning authority given the consultation responses that we have with no objections. So I did want to make you aware of that. And yes, those are the two things I think you need to think about. And if we are considering not going with the recommendations of officer, we do need to consider the reasons for refusal then as well. So please, members, before you take that vote, to consider how we move forward with that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. We got another flood of hands wanting to come up now. So, Councillor Butler, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Following the visit that we made yesterday, one of the things I picked up on was, and this goes back to the nature of the fact that these are two applications. It's my understanding that Welsh Water think that the water sport building in particular is underused. But my own personal feeling is, in light of the fact the building is in an SSSI, I believe Welsh Water really should reconsider how they can better use it to reflect the fact that it's very special nature because of where it is located. And so therefore I am very concerned about this application, particularly in relation to the water sport building. Thank you.
Thanks for that. The next on my list is Councillor Bonfield, but you've got summing up at the end anyway. Do you want to restrict your comments and take everybody else and then you come back in at the end? Or do you want to speak now?
I just really wanted to ask some questions to officers, if I'm allowed to do that.
Go ahead, then.
And then maybe sum up.
Go ahead.
No, we all know, everybody in this room, we've all got that gut feeling that this is not the right thing to do. You know, how can we, like Councillor McKenna said, let our children grow up in a world where, you know, we're not respecting wildlife? I don't teach my son to have that view. It's immorally wrong. You know, if we were to accept one proposal or application and then reject the other, you know, I'm not saying that I'm objecting to business meetings being held at the visitor centre, but why do there need to be any functions there at all? You know, it is not intended for that. This is a safe space for the wildlife. It's a triple SI, it's an SLA, and there shouldn't be any functions going on there. It is not a venue for weddings or, you know, any functions at all. So that's my view on it, and I move to, you know, reject applications for functions and just accept, you know, business hours, business meetings within business hours.
Okay, thanks very Councillor Carlard, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Kind of picking up what Craig said and what I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of think there's a compromise somewhere, and looking at the plans of the buildings, and someone mentioned when we were there yesterday, it might have been Councillor Riley, that this, you know, things, the water sports clubs able to, you know, giving them the ability to hold their AGMs is a nice thing to do. We don't want people having parties. It's a city place to have parties. But, you know, I would be in favour of rejecting the application for the visitor centre, but approving the heavily conditioned application on the water sports centre. It's got smaller windows. It's further away from the centres of population. And then it could be used by the clubs that already use it, you know, as a service to community. And I think it's a halfway house. I think it massively reduces the impact on the wildlife. It's further away. It's a bit more tucked around the corner. It's got fewer windows. So that's kind of where I'm feeling at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Riley. Sue. Oh, sorry, yes. Tony, yes, you saw you were...
I'm sleeping quietly. I don't think we should take the route of a compromise this afternoon. I think the representative of Welsh Water can see feeling in the room. I can see if they both went through as approved, we'd be having a function every week for 30 weeks of the year. I would suggest, following Councillor McKenna's view, that we defer this, and let the applicant go away and decide which one they want to bring back to us.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Right, your turn now, Sue.
Sorry. I'm tending to agree with Councillor Callard that there is some room for compromise here. The visitors centre, although it does have lights across the front, it is the closest to the road where after dark lights are flashing in that area anyway. So I'm inclined to say that if we were to look at, it's a very large area of water, and we didn't actually see where we were yesterday, the expanse which is sort of round the corner. And I'm inclined to say that there is areas in this reservoir where wildlife can exist well without it being particularly affected, particularly where the visitor centre is anyway. And I'm thinking perhaps if we could compromise by restricting or taking out the use of live music, amplified music, in or outside, that there is scope to approve some of this for some of the clubs that use these facilities. It is a vast expanse of water, and these two facilities, whether we looked at approving both of them or one of them, as I say, the one is very close to the road, and there is a lot of flashing lights as vehicles go past anyway.
Thanks for that. A thought occurs to me with regards to the boathouse, should we call it, the other one, is that's actually closer to the northern end. So that might have an issue. Councillor Rook.
Thank you, Chair. But Councillor Riley's stolen my thunder. I was going to suggest that the complete opposite to what Councillor Callard suggested, and saying, well, maybe we look at the community, the visitor centre, sorry, rather than the boathouse, because that's closer to the roads, we're further away from the where you would expect to find the nesting birds, and is less likely, in my opinion, to have an impact. That way, you're also limiting the number of events available to 12 per year from the 24 that is currently on the table. So for me, that's a decent compromise. If this was a country estate in the somewhere, and they were looking to enhance what they offer at that country estate, would we be giving us the same sort of consideration? There will always be an impact on wildlife, but any development that we allow is what we do to mitigate it as much as we can. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Nicola, but did you want to come? You didn't want to come in, did you? No. I think we've probably given that sufficient airing now. There's 3 considerations as far as I can see. To go along with officer recommendation and approve it, or to reject it, obviously, or there's been enough points brought up here that the applicant's agent and officers have taken on board to look at deferring it, to give them the opportunity of reconsidering. The sort of reconsideration would be to drop off the parties, to keep the meetings. I think the boathouse should only be meetings, possibly. That's one of the options. I think it's possibly worth deferring it to give them the opportunity of coming back with a more acceptable application. So I'm going to suggest, Nicola, that you put approve, reject and defer in the voting bar. Can I have any...
Chair, but will we be having 2 votes?
it'll be the same for each of them, but we do need to vote on them separately. But as I say, before I do that, and I bring Craig in, you've got the opportunity of summing up, Faye, but if I just bring Craig in first.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to suggest, Chair, to take a vote on whether members agree with the recommendation of officers, yes or no. If the applications are refused, then we need to state what those reasons are for refusal. Then we will naturally go back to the applicant over the next month in any case and defer and speak to them with regards to the meeting, if that was the case, and then we can bring that back, because we'd have to confirm those reasons for refusal in any way. So they will come back if that is the situation.
So rather than put...
Defer on the voting. Do elected members agree with the elected members of the planning committee agree with the recommendation put forward officers? Yes or no? And if it is a no, then we need to establish what those reasons for refusal are.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody happy with that? Faye? You're happy with that? Okay. So can I have somebody propose that we, well, for now, go along with the officer recommendation? Is any? I have to ask. Is anybody prepared to propose approval?
Yeah, sorry.
No. Okay.
Just to say the vote's up to go is whether or not we agree with the officer's recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. So if you can.
Who proposed?
Nobody was prepared to.
Just to make it clear, is 762 which one is which? 762 is the.
Well, at the moment, 762 is the main building, the cafe. So if you'd like to vote now, then please.
The officer recommendation.
Yeah.
Recommendation. Yeah.
Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, that's against.
Against officer recommend.
Yes.
So you'll be coming back on that anyway.
Can I just clarify in terms of reasons for refusal, and would that be based on ecology and wildlife with regards to Planning Policy Wales, rather than any impact on amenity or anything like that? It is ecology, wildlife, which is the main consideration from Planning Committee. Yes?
Yeah, Craig, I'd also be concerned as well with regards to highways, just because we don't know how many of these events will hold. For example, if they hold 100 and say people car share, that could be an extra 50 cars on that highway, which could have an impact on local residents.
Chair, can I ask, by show of hands of the Planning Committee, whether they agree with that? Because I think we need to establish what those reasons for refusal would be.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you put your hands up, and those online, can you just give me a thumbs up or down?
Both of you said. We both went to say it.
Is it?
Sorry, Chair. I was asking, so we've established that the Planning Committee agreed that the reason for refusal is relating to ecology. Councillor McKenna has suggested that potentially the Planning Committee refusing based on highways. All I was asking for a show of hands via the Chair as to whether that is the case for all Planning Committee members, or are we just refusing this application based on ecology matters? So I guess the show of hands is to, do you agree with a reason for refusal should reflect highway safety? As well as ecology.
So, yeah, again, those online, thumbs up or down, hands up if you agree with that in the chamber. Hands up if you don't. And everybody is happy online.
Okay.
In that case, we'll go to the second application, which is 763.
Okay.
So if everybody can vote no, please.
So again, that's against.
That's
Approval.
Clearly against approval. So thank you very much, everybody. Officers will go back to the applicant now and have a look at those points that we raised, and we'll have it back before us at the next meeting with reasons for refusal and any other considerations. Okay. In that case, the next one on our list is the Bryn Garage at Pergam.
Chair, sorry, I wonder if is it possible to take a break before the next? We've been here for a couple of hours.
Yeah, if you want to take a break, for what do you want, 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay, all right, thanks. We've Marianne? We just got a little bit of housekeeping. We're not sure that there was absolute clarity over the reasons for refusal of the second one. Now, my reading of the situation is they were the same as the reason for refusal of the first one, so that's on ecological and highways grounds. Can everybody with a show of hands or thumbs up in the online members, if you agree that those were the reasons for? Yeah.
Personally, it's just for ecological grounds, not highways grounds.
Can you put your mic on, please?
Sorry, does it comply with Planning Policy Wales 11? Because as far as I can see, they don't.
Yes, officers are recommending to you that it does comply with Planning Policy Wales, that the development is in accordance with wildlife. It wouldn't have a significant impact on wildlife interest given the conditions that are outlined in the report, and it does comply with Planning Policy Wales and our own policy, NE1 nature conservation in Monmouthshire, in terms of it isn't going to have a significantly adverse impact on wildlife. But yes, obviously members have agreed on the previous application that there was a reason for refusal with ecology and the impact on highways. From that conversation then, it feels like the reason for refusal on the second application is also for the same. I would stress quite significantly that I've got concerns with regards to the reason for refusal being on highway grounds, given we have no objection from our statutory consultee in relation to highways. It is an existing road network. We aren't introducing any new accesses. Parking provision is on site. I don't foresee there being a significant harmful impact on highway safety for that to warrant that reason for refusal. And I think I do have to make you aware as your officer that there is the potential there for costs if that was to go to appeal. So I just wanted to let you aware of that. Obviously, both these applications will be coming back to the next planning committee, so you can consider these reasons for refusal at that planning committee when you vote at them in terms of the detail. I will just turn to some legal advice. Do we need to take another vote in relation to that second application just to agree that they are the reasons for refusal?
Can do. As you say, we will come back at the next planning committee. But if you're happy to do that, perhaps we can draft with certainty then and then bring it back. Yeah.
So can we go to the? Sue?
I don't want to reopen a can of worms. But it's all been quite a complex debate. I'm going to stick with my concern, which was the party venue concern. And I'm just wondering, and there's clearly there's also a concern which Craig has raised, that we're setting ourselves up to lose an appeal and have a huge amount of expenses awarded against us. I'm just wondering whether, and I know I'm really sorry if this is reopening a can of worms, but I'm wondering it'd be practical to propose an extra condition that there's no amplified music, which I think will kill any of the sort of partying we're worried about. But otherwise, and at which point we could approve, and that gives them the chance to come back on that one point. That's probably a legal question or a procedural question.
Anybody got any thoughts on that? Tony?
Yeah, the other concern was what Jane was raising about the number of events that go on, virtually 8 months of the year, event every week. That became the road issue. And that's why I felt that the two plan applications together was a bit naughty, because we were trying to choose between one and the other. But yes, it's to do with the roads because it's going to be 32 weeks of the year.
Okay. Yeah. We can't have this debate again. What we'll do, that was certainly noted, the business about the impact on the highway of these additional events. We'll list the reasons for refusal. They'll come back to us in a month's time. We can either approve them or modify them at that meeting. Anything you want to add to that, Craig, before we move on?
Joe, do you think we need to have a vote to confirm?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're happy, you'd rather have that.
I'd rather have if it's okay with the chair.
Yeah.
If we could have that vote in terms of officer, elected members of the planning committee, considering that second application, and the reasons for refusal would be based on ecology, and I believe it was muted for highways as well.
If we forgot about the highways bit, would that make a big difference to whether we're going to have to pay a lot of costs?
Almost certainly,
Is it that one that's making the costs so high?
That's the danger.
Yeah. But if we hadn't got that one, we just got the ecology one.
That's okay.
This is just my personal opinion in terms of your officer advising you. I feel that in terms of the two arguments and the two reasons for refusal that have been put forward, ecology, you can see the debate in terms of the professional opinions with regards to Natural Resources Wales, Torfaen, Gwent Wildlife Trust, and other aspects in terms of the debate with regards to the impact on wildlife. With regards to the highway considerations, I think you've got quite clear steer from your own statutory consultancy and from your own officer with regards to highway safety. This development would not have a detrimental impact on highway safety. But that is for the planning committee now to decide in terms of whether it is a reason for refusal or if it isn't.
So I was going to suggest that we just kept the ecology and left the highways off. I don't know if anybody else
I'll second that.
Just keep ecology.
Yeah.
Sorry. On the highways issue, I mean, it's obviously going to have an effect on residents if, guests are leaving the venue all at midnight, then that's going to have quite an impact on residents in that area. Do we take that into consideration or not really, because it is a through highway anyway?
Chair, okay. Councillor Howells, you need to consider the report that's been put in front of you, your advice from your highway officer who's outlining to you that this development would not have an adverse impact on road highway safety. Obviously that has been muted with regards to members of the planning committee. It's whether you agree with that or not, ultimately, given the information and based on the balance of probabilities of the information that's before you today. So that's what you need to decide. I think this has unfortunately opened up a slight can of worms in terms of members seem to have a difference of opinion here in terms of whether it's ecology or highways. It might be worth, Chair, opening the vote on both applications again, potentially with one reason for refusal, that being ecology, given what some members have said. But I think you need a member to put that forward, really.
Yeah, well, I was going to suggest that anyway. But Sue, you got your hand up?
No, I would propose that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cleaner. It's the one thing that everybody was clear on, whereas there is a difference of opinion over the highways issue. So we'll take the votes again. So the vote this time will be to restrict to ecology reasons rather than for or against. So can you do that, Nick?
Do you want me to put that in, yeah?
Yeah.
On the first, do it separately for both applications. Yeah. So who seconded? So Sick proposed, who seconded to go to this?
Phil, the applicant left this meeting not knowing what we're doing now.
Well, it's all coming back in a month anyway. We didn't have a formal proposer and seconder for that, so Ben's proposing it and Jan is seconding it. No, it will come up now in a minute. Right, so to refuse on grounds of ecology. So for, against or abstain, okay? Can you vote now, please? And this is on the 762, this is the visitor centre. Sue?
Could I just ask, if you voted for approval, then how can you be voting on the reasons?
No, we're only currently voting on refusing on the grounds of ecology. This is the reasons why. Nothing to do with the application that's already been turned down.
Just to carry up on Sue's point, Sue's saying if you voted to approve the application, then you can't give a reason for refusal because you didn't refuse it. But that's her point, so you can just abstain is what I mentioned.
It's absolutely clear. Joe, are you happy that it's clear? Yeah. It's. Can we just settle down, please? There's so many conversations going on here. It's absolutely clear from the vote. There was a majority, irrespective of how they voted before, for refusing on the grounds of ecology. So if we can do the same with 763, please.
Same the next one. Yes.
So again, you're voting for, against, or abstaining on the reasons for refusal of 763 on the grounds of ecology. And that's clearly carried. So I think we'll now move on to application DM 2019/01684, the change of use of an agricultural land to B8 storage, land to the south of Bryn Garage on the B4598, Langaddock Lodge to Camis Road in Pen, Bergham. And Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members and those following us online at home. So as you stated, this is a full application that seeks planning permission for the change of use of agricultural land to use class B8, which is storage. And just for the purposes of clarity, the application is presented to you today, members, at the request of the previous ward member, as well as the threshold of objections from at least 5 separate households having been met. The plan you can see on screen now shows the application site. It's just to the north of the A40. And you can see there, roughly indicated, this is the area subject of the proposed B8 use. This is just a photograph showing the existing yard and building that is run in association with the Bryn Garage. As it's noted in the commentary text there, that this is an established business that repairs and tests motor vehicles, both private and commercial. And this is a view from the site frontage. It's the B4598, sort of runs between Abergavenny and Raglan. And this is just a further view from the site frontage. The site is set behind those dwellings you can see on the opposite side of the road. So these are, obviously some of the members will have the benefit of a site visit yesterday. So these are some of the views within the site showing the existing yard area and various vehicles and containers parked within it. That shows the yard area again with the neighbouring dwellings shown in the background. Again, a similar view, just showing a sort of wider panoramic view from taken within the yard area. And that's looking directly then to the rear of the neighbouring properties to the north. So this graphic you can see on screen now does sort of depict an evolution of the site. So its top image is taken from 2010. And that's a more current image there where you can see the storage area, which has in part sort of commenced into that area highlighted with the circle. So just for clarity, it's the red line area you can see on the screen now that is subject to this application, which is seeking formally B8 storage use. So that's the red line boundary you can see, just for the sake of clarity. So this is a internal sort of layout showing some of the features, the trailer parking, the storage containers, and storage buildings. There's annotation there of the planting, both existing and proposed, and I'll come on to that point later in terms of the existing vegetation. So, as I stated, by way of background, the Bryn Garage is a well-established commercial business that operates for the repair and testing of motor vehicles. In association with this, the applicant has developed a motorsport and exhibition business that requires the use of articulated trailers and storage of other associated equipment that's used for running these events. And just for the absolute sake of clarity, these events are obviously taking place off-site around the country. And it's for this arm of the business that the B8 storage use is required. So in addition to the change of use of the land, the proposal would see extension of the existing hard surfaced area, repositioning of an existing storage building, placement of 6 articulated trailers and 5 storage units. New soft landscaping is also proposed, and just for the sake of clarity, there are no changes proposed to the site access arrangements as existing. So in terms of the detailed material considerations, the officer's report does provide you with a detailed overview of these, so I'll choose to focus just on 3 key and pertinent planning issues: landscape visual impact, residential amenity, and biodiversity. So firstly, looking at visual impact, the scheme has been amended, and a parcel of land in the southeast corner of the site is no longer seeking permission for B8 use. Now, you'll have noted, members, in late correspondence, an additional condition requiring a restoration scheme for this to be agreed and implemented. The amendments to the scheme through the course of the application have overcome the initial concerns of the Council's landscape officer, and this, however, is subject to the conditions as set out in the officer's report, including a programme of landscape maintenance. Third-party concerns are certainly duly noted with regard to the commercial use moving into previously agricultural land. However, officers are satisfied that this application would actually now provide a clear and visible boundary to the site that would appropriately enclose by new hedging and would provide that distinction between the sort of commercial land and adjoining agricultural. The development would be sited within an existing cluster of buildings, both commercial and residential, and therefore, whilst acknowledged that there would be some views from local right-of-way network, given the context of the site and the associated buildings, officers are agreement with the view provided by the landscape officer that the application would not cause unacceptable harm to the wider rural setting. Members will have noted on site yesterday that the submitted drawings reference an existing hedgerow along the northern boundary, which is actually not present in situ. So therefore, if members are minded to approve the application, it's proposed that an additional condition, as follows, is added to ensure that a suitable landscaping scheme is submitted that would provide that necessary planting in that area. And that condition would be worded to the effect of, within 3 months of the date of this decision, a scheme of soft landscaping shall be submitted for approval in writing by the local planning authority. The scheme shall include indications of all existing trees, including spread and species, and hedgerows on the land, identifying those to be retained, and set out measures for their protection through the course of the development. An implementation of this agreed landscaping would be secured via existing condition 3. Finally, in respect to visual impact, it's noted that there are a number of trailers and containers that can be stored at any one time, and this would be controlled via condition. And in addition to that, there's a 4.2 metre height limit on items that can be stored in this approved area, if minded to be approved. So for those reasons, officers are satisfied that the development would accord with the requirements of LDP policies DES 1, LC1 and LC5. In respect of third-party residential amenity, as noted previously, there are a number of residential properties that are in close proximity to the application site. However, it is important to acknowledge the context of this site, both in relation to the existing Bryn Garage use as well as its position approximately 130 metres from the A40 trunk road. So notwithstanding this, it is proposed to manage the hours of the use between 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday to Fridays, which are considered to be normal working hours and would align with the ongoing use of the Bryn Garage. As noted previously, the number of trailers and containers stored would also be limited. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has been consulted and did initially request further information in respect of noise, light and water, which was subsequently provided. And based on this, the Environmental Health Officer has confirmed that there are no grounds for which they can substantiate an objection to the application. As such, subject to detailed conditions proposed, officers are satisfied that development would maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties, and therefore would accord with the relevant criteria within policies DES 1 and EP 1. Finally, in respect of ecology, as I noted earlier, considerable new hedgerow planting is proposed. In addition, Condition 5 will require details of biodiversity net benefit to be approved and implemented. And furthermore, no additional lighting is proposed, and a condition removing normal permitted development rights in respect of lighting is also set out. Given the operational hour limitations, these will negate the need for late night movement and use of this space, and therefore negate further that need for any future need for lighting. So on that basis, the development would accord with the requirements of policy NE1, which is for nature conservation. So in conclusion, the application's been very carefully considered over some time by officers and our consultees, which has seen amendments and further information provided when requested. Officers accept the points made by local residents in respect of the growth of the site. And as stated earlier, this application could now provide a definitive and clear boundary to this site. So the application is presented to you members this afternoon with a recommendation for approval, subject to the additional restoration condition set out in late correspondence, as well as the soft landscaping condition I presented earlier. So on that basis, it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And who's the local member there now? Alice. Yeah, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, we've got no town and community councillors, no objections, no supporters want to speak. So, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I support this. At the moment, part of an agricultural field has got a lot of their lorries and things on it, and by making this close up to the business into a parking and storage area, it'll remove those off that field, and that field can go back to agriculture as it should be, and it's going to be far more tidy if they're all in the same place together, and I can't see a problem with it, and it's going to be a lot better when they can put a decent surface under them as well. But no, I support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Chair. I would support this, but with I would like to make a recommendation as well. I think when you went onto the site, you couldn't help but be struck, excuse me, by how close to residents' windows this was. But I was also quite impressed, and I'd like confirmation of that the gentleman who was on site yesterday said that during, when they're doing events, they can be employing 350 people, which is obviously good. So I would like some sort of confirmation if that's the case. But also, I would like to see whether we consider that it says no additional lighting, but this was agricultural use. When can we limit the times of the trailers are coming and going? Because if that's in antisocial hours, you don't need a light if you've got trailers with lights on.
Andrew, got any thoughts on that?
Shall I, if there's any other question, I know Councillor Butler's got a hand up. Shall I wait for any further points and then come back in one?
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. This is, I hope, just a small question. I did note that one of the residents nearby objected about the floodlight. I note that the security floodlight, I can't speak now, floodlight, is on all night. My question really is it's already there, it's not additional, but is it properly shielded for concerning light pollution? I can't imagine there's a condition we can put on this, but I'd just like, for my own peace of mind, to know that the floodlight is properly shielded. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah. Just in terms of the first points raised by Councillor Riley, unfortunately I wasn't on site yesterday with you members in terms of the number of people that are employed in association with the storage and events, the wider sort of nationwide events business. Ultimately, that's not sort of material really to our consideration. Is this land, in a land use sense, appropriate for a B8 storage use? So I wouldn't sort of give weight to potential number of employment people. I think it is simply, is that an appropriate use for that land, owing to its surrounding land uses, and is it compatible with those land uses? So officer's advice is that yes, it is, for the reasons I've outlined in the presentation and that the officer has covered in the report. In terms of late night use, as with any activity covered in association with the storage use would be controlled via the operating hours condition. So if there were works in association with the B8 use that were carried out outside of those hours, then it's a breach of conditions matter that would be picked up through the planning enforcement function. In respect of the existing floodlights, please correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Butler, this is on one of the existing buildings. I'm not aware that on the existing buildings there are any permitted development right restrictions that are in place, so it wouldn't be covered. We are now looking at this as an additional parcel of land in which we are applying and it's within our gift to put such a condition on and feel it's necessary and appropriate. So we can't cover and condition and control things on buildings that aren't subject to those sort of restrictions. We can certainly look into it just to confirm as a sort of a side matter if there are any breaches of planning control in respect of that light. But given the age of the building, it's unlikely to have those restrictions. But we could look at it separately. I think this application needs to be looked at on its own merits, and it is appropriate for it sort of wipe its own face. I think that's the expression, that the lighting is restricted on this as a use of that land.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Nobody else has indicated that they want to speak. We have a report before us with a recommendation for approval. Would anybody like to recommend approval? Councillor Powell and Councillor McConnell for seconding. Okay, Nick, can we have the voting function up, please? So can you vote no then, please?
Yeah, so that's been approved.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We now move on to Rockfield Farm and Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all. This application seeks reserve matters approval for 120 dwellings on Rockfield Farm in Undy. The extent of the application site is shown outlined in red. If we can just go to the next slide, please. The site is currently undeveloped and is located to the south of the M4. And the next slide, please. These are just the internal images of the site recently. And if we go to the next slide, please. And again, please. So the site was allocated for development under policy SAH5 of the Monmouthshire Local Development Plan, and outline consent has previously been obtained. The on-screen plan shows the approved indicative layout from the outline consent. Part of the allocation to the east of Silurian Road has been granted at reserve matter stage and is in the final phase of being completed. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is the proposed layout for the two portions of, or two parcels of land that we're considering today. There are a number of site constraints that I run through at this point. Firstly, there's a public right-of-way that runs through the site. In its current location, this would severely limit the development on site. Therefore, it's proposed that it will be realigned and will run through the central pedestrian link as proposed. And you can see that running from Silurian Road on the east, past the large protected tree, through the site and down to the area of open space in the southwest. Thank you. The realignment of the path would need to be addressed via a separate manner, is a separate process to the Town and Country Planning Act. However, the public right-of-way officer has raised a qualified objection on the basis that this hasn't been completed as of yet. However, from discussions with them, they have no objection to the proposed routes through the site on the basis that it's primarily a pedestrianised route that does not utilise estate roads. Secondly, is that there's a highways consideration. We do have an objection from the highways officer. They've raised a number of points which have been addressed in the report. One of the main considerations of this is that along the access Silurian Road, you can sort of see there's a kick out in front of plot 64. That forms part of the adopted highway. That needs to be extinguished. However, we are confident that we'll be able to achieve that via the appropriate manner. However, that is something that will need to be done. Therefore, what we're seeking today is a resolution to approve this, and we will then take it to delegated panel to agree the appropriate manner in which the extinguishment will be undertaken. Additionally, concern has been raised that not all plots have parking provision in line with the Monmouthshire parking standards. There are 20 houses that do not benefit from, or basically they have one less space than would be required under the parking standards. The parking standards were adopted in 2013 and they've been superseded by both Planning Policy Wales and Future Wales. Both Planning Policy Wales and Future Wales advocate lower levels of parking provision where appropriate. In this instance, we do believe that lower levels of parking is justified on the small number of plots where there would be a reduction. Because of its location, it's within the settlement boundary, it's an allocated site that is considered to be a sustainable location. Additionally, what we've achieved is the provision of cycle storage on plot for each property that would not have the full level of parking provision. Additionally, just in terms of the overall design, the ethos with the road layout was that they would be central main carriageway roads and then secondary roads, which are treated more as sort of private drives and shared spaces. These do not benefit from footpaths as they are designed to be shared spaces. This is something that's advocated by the placemaking charter that Monmouthshire Council are a signatory of. Additionally, some of the main link roads only have a footpath on one side, and it's only in locations where it serves development. So you'll notice along the top east-west road, there is only a footpath proposed to the north, as there is no development to the south, and and additionally, to the south of the sink, there's no footpath proposed there. In part, there's no footpath proposed to the south of the sink, as we're looking to protect that ecological asset and not to encourage people from into that location. However, what we do have is appropriate footpath crossing points at the junction on Silurian Road that allow people to cross when travelling north and then changing direction to go west. And similarly, we have a extended footpath at the south of the sink to allow people to cross to the footpath on the other side of the road. And also concern was raised due to the rear parking that is proposed to serve the flats on the northern section of the site, as it was thought that this was an unusual relationship. We do not consider that parking at the rear is unusual or would have any unacceptable impact. I just have a quick, sorry. Since this report has been published, we have had additional a conversation with the highways officer, and they've since provided suggested conditions, including the requirement for an estate street phasing and completion plan. And again, should our recommendation be endorsed, we would take this to delegated panel for final agreement also. Running east-west through the site is the sink, which you can see the green band of planting running through the central section of the site. It's been imperative that we not only treat this feature very sensitively, but also try to enhance it. So we've limited development around the sink to try and limit any impact. And also, through our biodiversity and ecological enhancements, we've looked to reinstate or reinforce the buffer with native planting and tree planting around it. In terms of biodiversity enhancement, there's also a wildflower planting in the north of the site, additional hedgerow planting throughout the site, and an extensive on-street tree planting scheme. So the ethos on the kind of the aim for this was that wherever you are within the development, you should be able to see a tree or a GI feature. The council's ecologist is satisfied with the scheme in its most recent submission, and there's no objection from an ecological point of view. The latest comments we did get from the landscape officer held a holding objection. The most recent plans have been received since then, and we consider them to address these concerns. However, amended comments have not been received at this point. In terms of drainage, the applicants have gone through the SUDS pre-application service and currently have submitted an application with the council's drainage department for consideration. The drainage officer has advised that the layout as existing is acceptable to achieve the appropriate levels of surface water drainage to be managed within site. You'll see from this plan as shown, there are 3 attenuation ponds, a pumping station, and there are numerous SUDS features throughout the site. In terms of sustainability, the proposed dwellings would be well served by amenities within the surrounding area, which are within walking distance. The development has been designed to allow pedestrian permeability and encourage active travel. As already mentioned, we have the bike storage on plots. We've managed to achieve 84% of the proposed dwellings would provide the provision for electrical vehicle charging to be installed, and also the flats are proposed with solar panels. If we could just move on to the next slide, please. That's essentially just an engineering drawing showing the same layout. And if we could go to the next slide as well, please. These are the more detailed landscaping schemes. So as you can see, that demonstrates the wildflower planting in the most northern corner of the development, and the reinforced buffer for the sink, and the development around the attenuation pond. And then the next one, please. in the southwest corner, you have the area of open space. There's no on-site formal play provision or anything of that nature to be provided on this site. So this has been provided adjacent to the play area that's accessed via the existing one on the adjacent development on Rockfield View. And then it links then through with the, you can see the green running through the middle is the public or proposed realignment for the public right-of-way. And then the next one, please. And then this again shows the additional attenuation ponds in the southeast of the plot. And then the next one, please. The top image here shows a street scene showing the what the view north would be from the proposed route for the public right-of-way. So what we've looked to do is to group materials together to create a sense of place as you move through the development. So the idea as you will go along the public right-of-way is that we'd have a natural palette of stone and render, and some houses would have one or the other or a mix of the two. Additionally, the boundary treatments there are proposed as hedgerow and stone-facing walls. And other parts of the site we're utilising brick and render and that mix to create the sense of place as you go through the site. And if we can go to the next slide, please. There is a slight change of levels throughout the site. For those who were on site yesterday, they would have noticed there's a slight change to the topography. It's not considered to be a significant, considerable incline by any stretch. This slide and the next one,